Hello. I today will be Paul, acting team leader, social worker, and today we'll have the lovely Jenna portraying Tom, father of Peter. Assessment 2, role play. Hello Tom. As you know, I'm currently in position of acting team leader to a team of support workers. Our service provides social and recreational care for young people like your son Peter with disabilities. Some of our roles are here to serve as service providers for our team to deliver services and social and recreational care for young people with disabilities, which recognise and understand that some of the challenges that an individual like Peter, and with a child who experienced domestic and he recognises and understands some of the challenges that an individual like Peter with a child with may face. We can provide you with, we have provided you with support in relation to CPL or Cerebral Palsy League, and you can assist you to link with a disability support agency and advocacy services. I'll be interviewing you, Tom, who's came to me in for a chat and some problems and concerns with his son Peter, who was a client with us. So, I'm Paul, how are you?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I'm fine, thanks.
Yep, nice to meet you too, Tom. Good to see you. I'll be discussing at the moment confidentiality today, and this will be confidential. In our practice, we are covered under the Privacy and Confidentiality Act. Anything that is said will be kept strictly confidential between you and I in relation to, and also Tom, I first must help you to understand your rights in relation to accessing our service. You have as much freedom to share as much or as little as you like, you feel comfortable, and that will stay between you and me, and it will will now go through your concerns. The only way that I would have to break that confidentiality if you wish to harm somebody or if you want to harm yourself. Is that understandable, Tom?
Yep, that's okay.
Perfect, Tom. Tom, tell us a little bit why you're here today and some of the concerns you have.
Well, first it's about Peter's care and safety in our home. My wife Jenny at times can be, even if she doesn't mean it, can be a pretty aggressive, angry person, and she certainly dominates our home and all of our family, particularly Peter and myself, as all other children have moved out. To be honest, Paul, I've had some concerns about my wife Jenny's care of Peter. She often criticises him and gets impatient and calls him a spastic when trying to get him ready to go out and hopping out of the bed and getting ready with his personal cares. So he's ready to go with yourself or other support workers. I must be honest, Paul, but I am always a gentle, quiet man, and I'm at times intimidated by Jenny. Even before Peter's accident 6 years ago, I've been very supportive and committed to my son, and we'd take him away on weekends to give Jenny a break. I must admit that more than one occasions when I saw you last week, Paul, when I raised concerns about Jenny's care of Peter, I must admit I appear anxious and tried to excuse Jenny's behaviour by saying she was often stressed. So this is one of the reasons for meeting with you today.
Okay.
And I thought I would phone and ask if I can meet with you regarding the situation. I know I must sound distressed. I guess I'm at my wit's end. And I love Peter dearly, and I'm desperate. And I want to know how to safeguard my son and help Jenny, who I also love dearly. Due to high medical expenses, I've changed jobs and now I work longer hours, including Saturdays. Jenny has become more aggressive to Peter and myself. Last weekend, when I returned home from work and found Peter tied to his bedpost by his hands, I just couldn't believe that his own mother, Jenny, would do that to him. I was so upset. I also observed bruises on Peter's arms and welts in his back. While untying Peter, Jenny entered the bedroom in an angry rage. Jenny yelled at me in a rage for burdening her with Peter, saying, "You're always at work and I'm here alone and have to do everything for him." When Jenny has rages, she has broken furniture, throws plates at Tom and kicked Peter's pet cat. Peter disclosed to me that he's frightened of his mother. Jenny, Peter and I have few friends, and over the years Jenny has alienated most of our relatives, and we now have no close friends, as Jenny says she's embarrassed to have friends around due to Peter's condition and his tripling.
Oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that, Tom, and thank you so much for sharing what's been going on all this time. And you're very brave to share this, Tom. I must also let you know that the Domestic and Family Violence Protection Act, you are covered under it. It's really, the term is sort of loosely defined as an act to provide protection of a person against violence committed or threatened by someone, as if a relevant relationship exists between the persons. But the main objects of the Act are to maximise the safety, protection and the well-being of the person who they fear or experiences domestic violence, and mainly to minimise the disruption to their lives and to prevent, to reduce domestic violence or exposure of children. Continue. Oh, right. By allowing the court for their actions, the objects of this act are mainly achieved by allowing a court to make a domestic violence order to provide protection against further violence, and B, giving police particular powers to respond to domestic violence, including the power of a police protection notice and imposing consequences for contravening a domestic violence order, better known as a DVO, or police protection liability for the commission of an offence. Here is a pamphlet with more information, with some helpful phone numbers, support groups and other websites that will be very helpful. And they're only a phone call away, okay, Tom? So from what you're telling me, Peter, what you're telling me, Tom, I'm sorry, is that Peter's conditioning is deteriorating and his demands are greater than last year, and there's a real change from last year.
Yep, totally, like night and day.
Yeah. Okay, it sounds like there's been a lot of changes in the home, quite a lot of stressful impacts, stresses in the home, a lot of things that are going on and bringing stress on Jenny and your wife, the rest of the family. Have you ever, the family, ever gone out for dinner or out to a restaurant or maybe a coffee in a park, and maybe take Peter to the park or a picnic or one of the other local parks around town?
Peter doesn't like home cooked meals and vegetables. I can usually get dinner together a couple of nights a week, or if we have money coming in, we'll order pizza, Hungry Jack's.
Yep.
But I just don't have time to cook, so we all stress in the house.
Yeah.
With all the stress in the house. So
Has there ever been any times, Tom, or anyone in the house that may have kind of gotten away of upset with Peter, or yelled at Peter, or even said like hurtful things to him?
Not really. My wife Jenny has not ever been a very patient person, and now she's gotten kind of more and more impatient and short with people and hates waiting for anything or anyone. She gets kind of more and more mouthy sometimes, so she'll sort of go off
Burp.
on
I'm gonna eat one
him.
of these chairs.
But I mean, we do the best we can to let him know that he's still loved, that it's not his fault.
And what about discipline? How has that been handled in your house? Has anyone ever been too forceful, or maybe even hit or physically hurt Peter?
Our kids never really gave us any headaches in the younger days.
Yeah.
But not ever. I mean, I used to give him timeouts when Peter was younger, but I know it sounds awful, but I don't actually have time to discipline him now, and with his physical and mental injury that he has.
Yeah. And I'm sorry for getting personal, but what about physical abuse? Has anyone ever hurt Pete in an abusive or maybe intimidating way, or an inappropriate way? We've seen some unexplained bruising and mood changes, sometimes crying and screaming from Peter, from myself and other support workers.
There have been times where my wife has been impatient with him, and with his condition and cognitive abilities, he can't stop his arms, legs from whirling around, so there could be some bruises on him.
Yeah. I know that's a hard question, Tom, for a lot of people to hear, but I just have to ask that question. So no.
No,
No, okay. Not ever.
not ever.
Yeah.
I would never let that happen to Peter
Okay.
in his condition. Okay. So he's been safe from physical abuse or from abuse, whether physical, financial, spiritual.
And so how do you think Peter is doing in this close family network? You were saying before that all his other brothers and sisters have moved away. How do you think he's doing in this? Do you think Peter still feels loved and supported?
Well, no, I guess I haven't really been around for him as much as I'd like to be, obviously. I do the best to let him know, we know how much I care for him. Sometimes we have a little bit of money extra. I don't get him something nice. I do get him something nice to eat, like takeaways that he wants. I've heard him kind of complain and mumble something either we can't hear or weren't meant to. Sometimes he might say, "You love my brothers more than you love me," but that's obviously not true. We love all our kids, including Peter.
So what do you think people would say if he was here right now and we asked him how he felt, or did he feel loved?
I'd say yeah.
There's some doubt?
No.
No?
I said I know my wife and I are doing the best we can, but I guess sometimes I feel like we're not doing enough for him. I don't know.
Okay. You mentioned there were some difficulties with your son Peter. Can you tell me a little bit more about what is happening with Peter and his cares and just day-to-day activities in the home?
Well, he's lived with us for the past 6 years or so. He was physically and mentally injured in a car crash with several head injuries. So he has days where he remembers everything and days where he's starting to slip more and more. And he's very judgmental to us as his parents and his support workers, and he can be very opinionated. He has the way. He likes things done a certain way.
And after you telling me all this, Tom, has there ever been any time that maybe your wife, Jenny, has maybe become physically aggressive, maybe to you or Peter in the home?
Never.
Okay. What about her relationship with you? How is she managing, and how are you managing together with Peter in the home?
Some days are definitely better than others. She's she's kind of tried to check my wife's behaviour when she was getting a little bit mouthy to myself and Peter. I guess it's probably the best way to say it.
Has it ever come to physical blows between the two of you?
No, just arguments here and there, and just venting our frustration. And we are constantly tired all the time. And now I'm working on Saturdays. It does make it so hard for the both of us, and we certainly aren't any younger.
When you mean arguments, how intense are those arguments, Tom?
It's like we raise our voices. I mean, my wife and I are doing the best we can here, and it's never come to physical blows. I work so much now, my wife does become frustrated with Peter and his needs, and sometimes he can be difficult, particularly first thing in the morning.
Yeah, you've got the next one too.
But I've taken some other action if that happened, and that's when I usually take Peter out for a walk or organise to meet up with his support worker and have some time out.
Is it kind of like arguing? Is it like yelling, screaming, door slamming at people, like throwing objects?
I guess you could say we've gotten loud. I mean, she'll go and kind of slam things in his room, and obviously I wouldn't let it ever get to the point where she hurt Peter.
And where is Peter when all this is happening?
Peter will usually go in his shell
Yeah.
and just want to watch his favourite shows and be silent in his room. So he'd be in his wheelchair and maybe turn his knee right up and throw his arms at you and snarl at you. Sometimes snapping and holding his favourite blanket close. And I guess, to be totally honest, my wife and I lose our patience and yell at him when he doesn't help us with his special needs, or if his support worker can't make it on time, and then we get frustrated, particularly getting him out of bed in the morning. That's a task and a half.
Yes, well, I've been there in the mornings, and I can definitely relate to that, Tom. So it seems like there's a lot of tension and arguing in that relationship. How often would you say that's happening?
Well, quite frequently with my wife and I. She's finding it quite difficult with Peter as his needs are increasing. And she's becoming frustrated with him, and will at times thrash out at him or argue with him, and kind of argue with myself at Peter, or even at his support worker, and yelling the house down, I guess, like a few times a week or once or twice a day.
And Tom, just one last question. Have in your family ever like hurt Peter, or maybe even tried to calm him down and was forcible with him, intentionally or not?
No. Not that I'm aware of, and unfortunately Peter has lost the ability to convey such things.
Okay. So, well, look, Tom, thank you so much for being able to share in that. I'm just going to recap. There's a lot of stresses, and there's a lot of change over the last year for Peter's cerebral head injury, and I've noticed that as well, being his support worker. He definitely has increased worse, and now he's finding it hard to walk or talk for himself. And I noticed that he has become irritated with himself and his deteriorating condition, which can bring a lot of changes in finances, which may lead to maybe not always having the food or the special items or machines that help Peter, with his special needs, or that Peter has needed to. I can also see that Peter's now got an extra room for him. And there's some stress and tension and arguing that's happening in that. But you've also told me maybe about all the other stresses and the stuff that may have contributed to Peter not sort of feeling as loved or cared for. On the other hand, it seems like your wife or yourself are not managing emotionally and physically at home and the day-to-day care of Peter, and now you're working longer and on weekends, and that obviously you're not using any drugs or alcohol, and have you told me? So, but there are concerns regarding physical, emotional, and physical abuse for Peter in his life, and you may have come from family members or more in Peter's life. So, Tom, to alleviate the concerns, I'm thinking that I could write you a referral for CPL, which is Cerebral Palsy League, support worker, CPL support worker. Now, they work directly with cerebral palsy clients and also head trauma victims, and they'll be able to give you some more help there with Peter at a low cost. It's up to you, and if you want me to contact them or not, here's a pamphlet and information. There we go. Okay. I do have some brochures, like I've given you pamphlets for you and Jenny to look at, and I'll let you go from there. But Tom, I am very thinking that it is important that to look at this sooner rather than later. So I think you're right. I think there is a connection between what's kind of happening for the support work at home and when Peter is with his support worker, and the difficulties that he's starting to have with all these stresses and the changes at his home. So look, I'm going to book up a follow-up appointment for us, for you and your wife and Peter to come in, and at that time we'll talk about some of the ways which I might be able to help or develop a plan, and then go together for more help and support your wife and your son, Peter, together. Does that sound okay?
All right, that sounds good. Thank you. Yes, I believe it's a good thing, and give us a helping hand with Peter and alleviate some concerns with Peter and how we're coping.
So make sure, just as you leave, that you make your appointment on the way out and come back and see me as soon as you can, okay?
Would you like me to talk to Peter about these extra help and programs?
Yes. So next time you have some time just to sit down with Peter and your wife Jenny, and then when I'm done, just make sure that on the way out that you talk to the reception about making another appointment, okay? And look, you've got my card. I'm the acting team leader, Mr. Paul Lawson. I'm the head social worker here, and look, we'll organise an interview and a referral for CPL, Cerebral Palsy League, for a consultation, right?
Yep, that sounds good. Thanks again, Paul.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. You have yourself a great day.